Hello, this is Silvia Pavoni, Investments Editor of the bank, reporting from the second official day of the Inter-American Development Bank meeting in Montevideo, Uruguay. And I'm talking to Mexico's Finance Minister, José Antonio Meade. Minister, thank you for meeting with us. And the first question I wanted to ask is about the impact of the global economic situation, and in particular the European crisis on your country, and how this differentiates from the impact that this situation has on the whole of the region.
Well, thank you, Silvia. Mexico has a very different situation in terms of its exports to Europe than the rest of Latin America. Many of the countries in Latin America engage in a large trade relationship with Europe. That is not the case for Mexico. Our exports to Europe is probably less than 1% of our GDP. So the real contagion doesn't come from trade, it comes rather through the financial sector. And given that Europe, through, I think, good policy, is now in a much better place than it was about 6 months ago, then the European contagion in Mexico has been quite small.
So this is good news for the country, and you mentioned the fact the contagion came through the financial channels. Continuing on this topic, the financial sector, the financial market in Mexico is pretty strong. It has had its own crisis in the past, and it has certainly developed into a market which is quite well capitalized and cautious. Talking about regulation as well, I believe that the country is ready to adopt new rules coming out of Europe. Could you comment on this?
Yes, our financial sector is practically Basel III compliant. We have very strong banks, they're very well capitalized. Their credit is growing at a very good rate. They're growing beyond 10% in real terms, and they are developing a very healthy loan portfolio. So you see credit to firms, to consumption, towards housing, growing at good rates and supporting our growth. So today Mexico can exhibit growth that is explained both by a dynamic export sector, but also through job creation and credit by consumption and investment within Mexico. So the financial sector is part, I think, today of a good story in Mexico.
And another important factor to make sure that the country continues to grow on the growth path is to make sure that its economy also continues to diversify. What measures have been taken to make sure that this happens?
Mexico is very diversified, both in terms of the sources of growth, again relying on exports, but also domestically. And within our export sector, we have also continued to diversify. Even at a time where Mexico explains about 13% of U.S. imports, up from about 10%, the amount of our exports that go to the U.S. has gone down from a little bit above 90 to a little bit less than 78. So Mexico's exports have diversified dramatically within the last decade, but as we have gained competitiveness, we explain a larger share of the imports of our largest trading partner. And domestically, both consumption and investment are doing well in almost all of our sectors: services, manufacturing, agriculture, mining. So overall, we have, I think, a pretty balanced economy.
And lastly, the meeting is, of course, organized by the Inter-American Development Bank, but I believe that the European situation is just looming as a worry in the background. Is this what you're depicting from the conversations you're having with your peers here as well?
More or less. I think we are trying to take advantage of the forum to engage more fully with our Latin American colleagues so that we can better reflect their agenda and their concerns in the G20 process that's ongoing. So my perception is that it is a very relevant forum to talk about Europe, but it is also, I think, a relevant forum to talk about Latin American priorities within the G20 context and within the development agenda of the continent.
And more specifically, what would be these priorities, especially considering Mexico within the G20?
Well, Mexico put forth 5 priorities in its agenda, and these range from recovering from the imbalances and correcting those so that we can continue to grow, reviewing the architecture of financial system, financial regulation, and we have an aggressive agenda in terms of green growth, access to energy, and reducing volatility in terms of food and energy prices. That agenda, I think, will be relevant for most Latin American economies. We are putting some emphasis in terms of financial inclusion, and I think that we will be able to enrich them through this outreach program and this outreach seminar that we will be having later on today.
Well, thank you. Good luck with the seminar, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.